Hi, everyone. Just want to welcome you to a special episode of the family-based categories with Charlie Oppenheim. So, Charlie, let's talk about family-based. We get a lot of questions about family-based. So, can you recap where the categories stand right now?
Sure. All of the rest of world family sponsored final action dates were advanced for the month of May. This is a very positive thing to be happening. It indicates that the State Department is attempting to maximize number use in the family sponsored categories. I would point out that in the April Visa Bulletin, one of the items provided estimates of how much the family sponsored categories are likely to move in the coming months. I would advise people to take a look at that. That is probably the best indication you can receive. But again, with all of the dates moving for the month of May, very positive sign. And I would expect them dates to be advancing steadily throughout the remainder of the fiscal year.
So, how do you define steadily?
Steadily move anywhere from several weeks to potentially a couple months in various categories. It all depends on how many numbers they need to use. I always kind of describe the movement of the final action dates as kind of like casting your net to try to catch more fish. You're trying to move the date to allow more applicants to become eligible for interview in a given month. And again, that will allow you to maximize number use. And given the fact that the State Department was 21,000 under the family sponsored limit during fiscal 2023, I think the State Department will make sure or try their best to maximize number use under this year's annual limit, which is 226,000.
So, which category do you think is going to move the most?
I think that they will all move steadily. I think that there is potential in the F2A category for rest of world. I think that that has a good chance to move quickly. When I was chief, we started to find in the F2A category, people got a little complacent in terms of finalizing action on their cases. And we found that often people would start submitting the required documents to the National Visa Center about 3 months before to 3 months after their priority date was reached by the dates listed in the Visa Bulletin. So again, they were delaying processing until they saw, their case was definitely within the final action date. So if that trend continues, we may see a fairly rapid movement of the F2A date.
Okay. And so when people submit their documents to the National Visa Center, does Department of State have any, can they see all of that information? Does National Visa Center report to DOS and say, you're probably going to have this many that are documentarily qualified in the coming months?
Yes, on a monthly basis, the National Visa Center submits a report to the visa office of all the applicants who have become documentarily complete. For example, if NVC has asked them to provide 10 documents, if they've submitted all 10 documents, they're considered documentarily complete. And anybody that say that the last report was sent on April 1st, on May 1st, NVC will submit a new report with any applicant that became eligible since that April report was submitted. All of the applicants that are reported on those reports, either the one May 1st or any previous one, they are considered for allocation of visa numbers based on the movement of the final action dates.
So if you're an F2A and then the petitioner becomes a U.S. citizen, like let's say it's a minor child, how does that work? Like how does the NVC notify the consulate, or how does all of that work that they get upgraded to now their immediate relative?
Yeah, if the parent became an immediate relative status, the visa office would know that. Depending if the child was, say, an unmarried son or daughter, then they would be converted to either first preference if they're unmarried son or daughter of a U.S. citizen, or third preference, potentially, once if they became a married son or daughter of a U.S. citizen. But the National Visa Center has all that case information, and they would update it accordingly.
Okay, so if I filed under F2A for my minor child as a permanent resident, then I became a US citizen, then I just have to notify NBC I became a US citizen, and then I won't have to sit in that quota wait, right? Because then I
Correct.
become an immediate relative.
Yeah, and that's why it's always very important to, update pertinent information to the National Visa Center. If you've acquired a new child for some reason, or, if there's any change in your case status, it's always advisable to notify the National Visa Center as soon as possible so they can update all the pertinent case information.
So, like if you get married or you have more children, notify them.
Right. Yeah. Again, the National Visa Center is the State Department's repository for all the cases that are being processed overseas. And then the National Visa Center takes care of the assembly of the information and reporting that information to the State Department if it's in a numerically controlled category. And then they're responsible for the scheduling of the cases, whether it's an immediate relative case where it's just not numerically controlled or numerically controlled. They're responsible for scheduling those cases for a future interview. And then they send, when the case has been scheduled, they send the case file to the processing post. So the post has all the required information they need. And then the applicant may be required to provide certain information at the time of interview.
Okay. So I've been an immigration lawyer for 25 years, and I remember whenever I would do family-based cases, there was always a backlog in F2A. Then all of a sudden, it became current across the board. And then now there's a backlog again. So what was that all about?
Yeah, it became current in July of 2019 because, as I said, for some reason, the F2A applicants, although we knew that there was a large amount of them out there, they were just not submitting all of the required documentation to the National Visa Center. In order to maximize number use, I made the visa category current, and it remained so for an extended period of time. And the beauty of having made it current is then any of the unused F2A numbers, I could then make them available in the other categories. So those unused F2A numbers could fall down for potential use in the F2B, the F3, the F4 category, or potentially, if they remain unused, fall back up into the F1 category.
But
So
F2A became backlogged again about a year and a half ago, or
yeah, and I think what that happened is, there was a buildup of cases, F2A cases, that were becoming documentarily qualified during the time when the State Department overseas offices were basically shut down or had little processing capacity during the COVID time. So all those F2A cases that normally would have been processed, allowing the category to remain current, they piled up. And because of the pile, there was more demand than there were numbers available. And therefore, they had to establish a final action date to limit number use. But again, now that the date's moving forward, we'll see if it can, get back to closer to a current status, maybe fall only a few months behind the actual calendar date. But we'll just have to wait and see.
okay. Well, thanks, Charlie, for answering some of our questions on the family-based categories. And we'll chat again soon.